that I relate to what you just earlier said, Aditya. I think one is, do people know what they're doing? We kept on coming back, throwing tokens at something. The number two is maybe relate to this is knowing what the problem you are solving, right?
Hmm.
And so a lot of upfront thinking, because you were saying, hey, sometimes maybe it's just a simple regression. And I exactly an example yesterday and today working with a client, and one of their stakeholder come back to them and said, there's no correlation between the data. The data is, it's just all noise, and what you guys want to do doesn't have sound statistical proof. He was able to go back and then looked at it, and he said, well, when they looked at the correlation, they looked at the linear regression, and the data is not normalized, it's not normal distribution. The data has a big tail, a long tail on the right side. And lo and behold, he fitted a simple, model with a log transformation with
Yeah.
a couple of variables behind, and it came out super strong, right?
Yeah.
So so you can throw in a lot of tokens to a problem like this, and it not necessary to get you anywhere.
100%. The reason why the like regression model came to mind is I had a friend that was working on something like in real estate, but was trying to go between the different LLM models that they have available, right? So you have like Flash, Haiku, trying to, and his biggest frustration was that it was taking too long to come back with a response. And so I'm sitting there, I'm watching him, I'm like, what are you doing? It's just, it's X and Y data. Just throw it into like a little Python service and run it through and it'll give it back to you in like, microseconds. So why are you running this through an LLM? He's like, oh, I don't know. I just thought it would be easier doing it this way. I was like, that's silly. Why would you do that? Right. And not in a mean way, but I'm just saying that those types of things where it becomes people's first instinct to be like, just throw in an LM, find the cheapest one that runs the fastest, doesn't matter, that's good enough. And fine, right? Technically, that's true. But at what point do you look at that and say, I could have also just asked this same LLM to just build a script that does this in Python automatically? And like you're still throwing tokens at a problem, but you're throwing tokens in a way that's more efficient, right? You're trying to use the tokens for R&D to figure out a solution that is a long-term solution that doesn't necessarily rely on tokens. And maybe the solution may need to rely on tokens, but how much of it needs to rely on tokens, right? And so a large
Yes.
part of our platform, we don't need tokens because we've really invested heavily in clustering models, ML models, things.
Mm-hmm.
And we like to say it's like the intelligence on top of the intelligence. Like we're we have a team of really smart people and they are very good at identifying what is the output first of all, and then working backwards to say what is the cleanest, most efficient way to solve for this output. And while most people nowadays may just go right to, hey, let's just chuck in an LLM and as long as it's cheap, we're fine. They don't settle for that. They're like, no, there's a way to do this programmatically using Python or something that'll solve this much quicker, much more efficiently, and won't require tokens. And then the thing that becomes really even more important, which again, I'll pass this on to Sif, but I'll tee him up here, is how much are you paying per month to keep your service running? I think that is the number one question that people should be asking when they're throwing everything at an LLM. And Sif, feel free to jump into your thought process on
That's
that.
a whole separate call, honestly. Just
Yeah.
how to be running efficient. And the good part is now with LLMs, you can ask it, how do I keep this efficiently running? How do I keep my infrastructure reliable but also lightweight without throwing stuff at it? Because you can run servers for days, right? You can run your LLM and pay thousands of dollars a month, but what are you getting out of that actually? Is there a cheaper service, a cheaper option there? Like one thing we do, we build most of our tools like in a modular way. So like you say, we're not throwing everything into an LLM. There's different tools on our platform that run different services. They work together, but that's kind of like, that's kind of the secret sauce, but in the sense of like, how do these parts work together without having to, rebuild everything in an LLM and work more efficiently? Something in this quote, like you said, Chion, where it's like the person who working at the company, their gut sense, they knew what was right in the gut sense, right? But the data
Yeah.
was telling them something else. So they knew how to, they just had to figure out how to solve, how to prove that thing to tell people this is the problem. That's the thing we see a lot of, where like the people at the companies, they're experts in their field, and they know what needs to be done instinctually. How do they prove that? And like, you have to
Mhm.
provide the right tools to actually prove that without going crazy and throwing money into the wind on tokens.
Yeah,
So
I mean, why bring a sledgehammer when a screwdriver will do? Like, it just
yeah,
doesn't make sense,
exactly.
right?
That's interesting. Yeah, because we work in these large organizations, especially industrial setting. I think we work all with very domain specific experts. And I think that the gut feeling they have, say from what you're saying there, is that it is a abstraction of many years of experience, right? That was the experience is what is allow them to have usually that intuition. Now the question is, how do we get that experience and intuition to an output and a result that is the hypothesis basically, right, being proved? And what I'm hearing you're saying is that there got to be some kind of direction, right? Guidance that not like just a blind trial and error, not just throwing darts, but if you have a technical understanding of how to approach these, you can approach this more efficiently with much lower cost. Otherwise you're just trial and error and then throwing all of that cost out of the window, right? I have, because we are managing, well, we work with our teams, also a lot of engineers and data scientists. One of the concern, the topic that we like always talk about, and my peers and we also talk about in industry is deskilling, right? So we are worried that the workforce contributors on these projects will de-skill over time, because if you're not going in to put that hard work to understand the theories behind how these, how the architecture, all of that work, how the math work at the end, right? Then how the computer science fundamental principles work, and just relying on tools and then throwing at the things, we worry that there will be a de-skilling process, and that's not good, because I think the most important thing at these days is know to ask the right question, and you can only ask the right question when you have the right understanding of the fundamentals, in my opinion. So it seems
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Well, I was going to say what I think is actually kind of interesting is there's always the risk of that. As the amount of people that these tools become accessible to, you're
Mm-hmm.
starting to see also people who have no computer science, no computer engineering
Sure.
background at all come in. But what I also think is interesting is that you're also getting people from different fields who have the same type of logic flow. Because at the end of the day, it's all just logic. Like, can you logically think through a process and then build the steps in and then run it all together efficiently? And so I think there's definitely the risk of people just saying, okay, let AI do everything. But I also think it's kind of exciting that, I mean, for example, like my wife, so she's a doctor, and she's starting to get interested in like, oh, I wonder if I can build this thing or build that thing, right? And it's it's an interesting shift for everybody to think more programmatically about things, where ordinarily, I mean, you wouldn't see people like that, even a little bit interested in trying to get involved in a lot of ways. I'll make that comparison. It's like adult Legos. I'm not the first one to make this comparison either, right? I mean, you see it all over Instagram, but I think it's so true. It's something that is accessible to everybody, that's fun to work with, and they may build great things, they may build weird things that don't work, but as long as they have the passion to keep iterating and working on it, I feel like there's also an opportunity to not use Claude Code, but regular Claude, to just be like, what is the right way to do that? I feel like that's going to be where you find the curious minds are the ones that
Yeah.
exceeding because they have the ability to do that.
I like the upside, yeah, and we are hooked on cloud code, so and a
Everybody,
cursor.
we are too. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
are
all
too.
are. Yes, the $200 flat rate is not. It's not going to be, the cap for all of us.
We're all a little bit depressed about
man,
that. So.
yeah, and we're even using that. I mean, they pushed out the UI design, right? So we're now using cloud for UI UX as well. This is going to, yeah, we're all, yeah, I don't know, yeah, depressed might be might be what is the word coming.
Yeah, one thing I want to what you said about deskilling, actually, I think when we so much deskilling, maybe like reskilling, like people have to learn different things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I like that.
How many people? How many people are writing C and doing memory allocation anymore, right? Like maybe like we were probably the last generation to learn that. Maybe no one does that anymore. Now the autocomplete does it, or you're writing in Java or React now or TypeScript that does it automatically, right? So like people have been kind of deskilling from that every day as we go through. I think it's not just a new evolution of what's next. So people have to learn how do we prompt engineering better, how do we actually edit the code better, or use different tools for that. But I think it's going to be a shift into what we learned to what we have to do now.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Good point. Good. I want to come back to the sort of the industry side a little bit for the next few questions, because I think we've done quite a bit of on this topic now. I mean, we're all passionate about this topic. We can talk about probably cloud coding and everything. We can go on for a long time.
Yeah.
So I do want to come back and then ask you, do you see the manufacturing or industrial environment that you work in has unique challenges for AI deployment?
Yeah, yes and no, because to give some credit to some of the more manufacturing heavy companies that we work with, especially around quality, there's quality and just the manufacturing process in general, they use a lot of software. They use a lot of software to manage, their margins, to manage their lead times, to manage, especially companies that invest heavily in like lean processes. You'll typically see that they've done the investment in getting the right technology stack to be able to track how each of their processes are doing to connect to each other. So I think what's interesting about it is the ones we've talked to, they've heard about LLMs, they want to use LLMs, but all of their data is strictly quantitative and like the most quantitative data that you're going to see. And so that's where our opinion as a company is formed around, okay, you don't need an LLM, you just need a Python script, is affected essentially. Where I think it's interesting, so I'll give you an example of one company where this isn't necessarily the manufacturing process, this is post-manufacturing shipping. One of the biggest issues that they're having is that they're not able to calculate effectively or efficiently what their shipping time, like their lead time and the cost of shipping is going to be for them to move stuff from one warehouse to another out to a customer across 1,000 locations. And the thing that's difficult for them to know is it cheaper for them to bundle specific parts together? So if I manufactured, 5 parts that are going to the same warehouse, if it hits a certain weight, you get charged it at a different level. So if they sort of optimize the packaging of those parts and go out to the warehouse a certain way, then they can actually cut costs. And when you're doing this across thousands of shipments, it actually saves them a lot of money. And then the other thing is, when they're shipping from their distribution to the actual customer side, then they are trying to invoice that customer as quickly as possible. They basically said if the invoice takes longer than an hour, they've lost the customer. And so as part of the invoice, they have to estimate the costs, but they can't necessarily do that quickly. And so there's that piece of it of, okay, can we pull in outside market data? Can we pull in, their internal pricing history data to try to create machine learning models that can predict what the price could be? Can we create optimizations around their packaging to figure out? And the same optimizations actually carry out through to a customer, right? If it's better to wait a day for a new part to come into the distribution center and then package it all together and send it out to the customer, may arrive a day late, but it saves them 10, 15 bucks on shipping, right? And so
Right.
That type of work is not necessarily core to the business, but is important to the business because at the end of the day, it does have an impact on their bottom line. And so
Right.
those are the types of use cases where it's like kind of, I call them like secondary insights that are still key to their primary KPIs. So this is fully impacting revenue and retention. And if they're able to beat out a customer by invoicing quicker and shipping parts for cheaper and estimating, what a customer is going to need before a customer needs it, they're always going to win. But that's not their IT team's job to build an entire system around that. That's where they would have to
Right.
come to us or somebody else to solve that for them.